Hey there, it's Jennifer McGuire. In this video, I'm going to show you a fun technique with the Ranger Distress paints. These are new paints and they're incredibly awesome. I'm going to show you a fun marbleizing technique. It's great for backgrounds. Now these cards are part of the Operation Right Home blog hop. Operation Right Home is an incredible organization that collects handmade cards to send overseas to soldiers for them to send home to their families back here in the States. It's a great organization. I really encourage you to check it out. These are the cards that I made, and I used the marbleizing technique on the little world images that you see there. The Tim Holtz Ranger Distress paints are really awesome. They're a water-based acrylic paint, very fluid, and they come in this convenient applicator. Makes them really easy to use without much mess. Now what I'm using here is watercolor paper, and I shook the bottle really well and applying the broken china distress paint to the paper. You can see it's nice and fluid. It's like a water meets acrylic paint, but it has some unique properties. Now I'm also going to go back. This is the Mowed Lawn Green color distress paint. I'm just putting little dabs. Now I don't worry if I get a little bit of the blue paint on the applicator. I can just wipe it off on some scrap paper. And this is the Salty Ocean color. It's more of a royal blue. Just putting little dabs of it here and there. Now you can see this doesn't look like much, but when we add water, it really becomes magical. I'm using watercolor paper so that it can handle all that extra water, but you could use regular cardstock if you wanted to. Now this is the Chip Sapphire. This is a pretty dark color, so I'm only putting little tiny touches here and there of this. I want this to end up not too bold, so by doing just a little bit of this bold color, I can keep it nice and soft. Now, what I'm going to do here is add a ton of water. What's special about distress paints is that they're reactive with water, just like distress inks. So they move and dance and play and blend and are awesome when they come in contact with water. So I'm just going to put tons of water on here, and you can see it start to move. But what's even better, to get the marbleizing look, I take my heat gun and kind of move and force the water around and the paint around. And you can just kind of make this marbleized look however you want by just aiming your heat gun wherever you want to move the colors around. If you wanted to, you could just walk away and let this dry on its own. But I think by applying that heat or the hot air blowing on it, you kind of move things and get some really cool marbleized looks. Now you can see this is quick and easy to do. Normally I would do a big background and do a ton of this at once and just cut it up and make a bunch of different cards with it. Now I decided to go ahead, and it was starting to dry, still a little bit wet. If you spray it with water, you'll get little dots and you'll see it react again with the water. As long as it's still wet. Once it's dry, it becomes permanent. So you could go ahead and add more layers over this if you wanted to. So you'll see me add a little more water here, and you'll see the dots show up. And you'll see everything kind of react and move a little bit. So again, I'm just going to keep this going here and just spray it every once in a while to kind of soften some areas and kind of move things around. Now you could also work some things around with your fingers if you wanted to. And if you want to, this is a baby wipe. I'm just going to dab it with a baby wipe and kind of remove some color here and there. And the wetness of the baby wipe also reacts with the paint. So you can see the cool effects that you can get with this. And I really encourage you just to kind of experiment with them. But this is definitely only something that you can get out of the distress paints because of their unique properties when they come in contact with water. So I'm just going to keep playing around with this until I'm happy with what I have. Then you could either just keep heating it until it's done and completely dried, or you can walk away and let it dry on its own. And I could use this as a background on a note card. I could even create different colors together, maybe some dark colors with little touches of white. Distress paints to create like a nighttime sky scene if you wanted to. But what I'm going to do for these cards is just stamp some images on this and basically use this as a marbleized paper, just something that I created myself. And you can see here how that marbleized paper is perfect for the oceans on these globes. So for the globes, I used this stamp set from Hero Arts. It's created in conjunction with Operation Right Home, and some of the money goes to support the organization. So I'm just going to put this on an acrylic block, and I'm going to stamp it with my favorite black ink. This is a Hero Arts black dye ink. I'm just going to stamp this repeatedly onto my paper, making sure that I allow some of the variations in colors to show on the stamped image. So I'm just going to stamp this a bunch of times. One of the nice things about Operation Right Home is they need lots of cards. So a technique like this where you can get lots of stamped images from one big paper is perfect because you can make lots of cards to send into them. So I stamped a bunch of globes here and tried to make the most out of this piece of paper. Now I also have another piece of marbleized paper that I created before with distress paints. This one's much more bold. I used a lot of darker colors here, and you can see how you can get some really wild patterns that are really quite fun. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of pick out some spots that I thought would also be good for some stamped images. But this was just another good example of the fun color that you can get with the distress paints. So now I've gone ahead and cut out a bunch of these, and I'm just going to add them to some different cards here. Now one of the things I want you to note is the back of these are kind of fun too because of the paint that got on the back. Look at that. So all those little scraps that I didn't use, I'm going to check those out and maybe die cut some shapes out of the back. It'll be perfect to go on a card. So now I'm going to add these onto just a piece of white cardstock, and I'm going to take this greeting from the stamp set. I think this is a great greeting for Operation Write Home or for a loved one. I'm just going to stamp this again with the black ink, and then I'll add this onto a note card. And I definitely think this is one of those greetings that could be used for many different people. You can use it for a guy or a girl, so it's one of those must-have greetings. Now I decided I wanted to add a little splash of color to this, so I used this die from Simon Says Stamp. It's a great one. It cuts a bunch of mini hearts. They're great for little accents on cards, and I thought it'd be fun to add one onto the globe. So I'm just putting a tiny dot of glossy accents. I'm going to put one of the little red hearts right on there. That glossy accents will hold tight, so you don't have to worry about it coming off. And I'm going to go ahead and add a little heart to a bunch of these globes. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a bunch here. And you can see a few of these globes over on the left there. My son helped me cut out. So he's going to make some of these for his teachers also. And I needed a few more small hearts, so I grabbed this fun die. This one's from Impression Obsession. It cuts a ton of tiny little hearts. What I like to do is just cut a piece of red cardstock or white or whatever and cut a bunch of these hearts and keep these in a little jar. So anytime I need a little heart to scatter on anything, I just have these from either this Impression Obsession die or the one from Simon Says Stamp. It's great to have these inexpensive little accents, and they're nice and flat, which makes them perfect for using with the Operation Write Home cards. So I'm just going to add a few more onto these, and if you wanted to, you could put a little glossy accent coating on these so they have a little bit of shine too. Now for the background of the card, I'm just going to use some Hero Arts Tide Pool. It's a nice teal color ink with their striped background, and stamp it onto one of the Hero Arts blue note cards. I think a striped background is great, especially for a masculine card, but really it can go with pretty much anything. So I'm going to go ahead and add this strip here. I decided to make it a horizontal card, and so I'll just trim off the excess that's sticking off the top and the bottom. And to give the look that I created a mat for this piece, I'm just going to totally fake it and cut a bunch of these little thin blue strips from some scraps that I had. Put some adhesive on the back and then just add them right up next to the stamped piece. So it looks like it has a nice blue mat, but it's just tiny little scraps that I used, and also it makes the card less bulky. So I'll just glue those down and trim the tops off. Then I decided to go ahead and put a glossy finish onto that heart just to give it a little bit of shine. So sometimes it's fun to use a technique like with distress paints just to create a little element on a card. Keep it simple, and it's great for mass producing. Now one of the other tips I wanted to share is I used the stamp greeting on this card. However, I wanted to create a bunch of cards and I needed some other greetings, so I just did some computer generated ones. I do this a lot with mass produced cards. So I created some other words that went with the same image, like "You mean the world to me," and "My world is a happy place because of you." And I also decided to make one of these for my son, and so I put on it a greeting that I always seem to say to him before I put him to bed every night. It says, "Of all the boys in this whole wide world, I'm so very glad you're mine." So, while you have all your supplies out, you might as well make cards for a bunch of people. Now, one thing I did want to mention is this marbleized paper technique is fantastic with these distress paints, and they just recently came out with metallic distress paints. Now, I didn't get these new metallic distress paints in time to make this video. However, I really think that little touch of metallic would be really cool in this technique. So I hope this encourages you to try the new distress paints and also to create some cards for Operation Write Home. If you have any questions, please visit jennifermcguireinc.com, and I'll catch you next time.